Hello everyone, I'm Heather Peterson and I'm here in the Riley Blake Design Studios today to do a couple demos for you. And just to tell you a little bit about me, I'm a pattern designer under the name of Anka's Treasures. So I do some single patterns like this, and I also love to do quilting booklets. So this is one of my most current favorites, featuring table runners, because I love to do table runners. This is part of my Trendy Table 3 series, so hopefully a few of you recognize those. And the reason I'm here today in the Riley Blake Design Studios is that I'm also a fabric designer. So that's a super fun part of my job. And I'll show you a couple of my collections that I've done with them. This one is called Indigo Garden, which has all of my favorite colors of Minnesota in the fall. That's what inspired the colors in this collection. And my other collection I have sitting here is called Winter Wonder. And I'm a Minnesota girl, so this one's inspired by all the things about winter that I love, and has a few wintry motifs and a few Christmassy type motifs. And I'm going to be kind of showing and demoing from both of them today. So I'm going to be doing my Aster pattern, which is behind me here. This one features the Indigo Garden collection, and my step outs here are going to be done with the Winter Wonder collection. So what we're going to start out with is we're going to be doing some easy piecing techniques. So I know a lot of people, when they look at this pattern, they think, well, that looks too hard for me. And that's partially why this is fun to show, because it's not really that hard. It uses two very basic quilting blocks that I'm sure most of you already know. It uses folded corners and half square triangles, and it's just the combination of those two things that makes this more complicated looking block. So I'm going to break it down step by step and walk you through how we're going to make that block. So let's slide a few things off to the side and get out my design boards here. So what we're going to be doing first is we're going to just do that basic half square triangle that I was telling you about. So the way that I like to do my half square triangles is I like to draw the line from corner to corner on my block. And I think one of the keys is it's very important to draw with a very thin pen so that you get a nice thin line, and that helps you stay accurate with your 1/4 inch on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and sew a couple of those pieces together, and then I'm going to show you a trimming technique that I like to do that I think is a little bit different than what most people do. So we're going to go ahead and chain and go right on to the next one. So if you're with me so far, this is very easy. I know all of you can do this. Then we're going to sew on the other side of the line and just chain right from one to the next. And already we have the basis for 4 half square triangles. Now the thing that I want to show you that I think is a little different than what most people do, and it's in how I trim this block. Because I think most people would just cut along the line, and then when you open up your block, you have these little dog ears here on every corner. And then that creates a lot of bulk later when we get to some of these points. And so I like to just trim those off right away. So if you think about what that shape is that the dog ear is, it's just this little teeny tiny little triangle. And if you put the two of them next to each other, as you cut them out of the block like so, it really is just a 1/4 inch square out of the corner. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a square out from the beginning, and I'm going to do that on this one too so you can see it again. Just a little 1/4 inch square out of each corner, and then let me hold still so we can get a close-up of that. So very easy to do. And then once you cut down this line, and when you're doing a bunch of them, you can do that with the rotary cutter. But once you open this up, do you see how all those dog ears are totally gone? So that cleans up those edges right away. So that's the method that I use for doing my half square triangles. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that little half square triangle and you're going to sew it together with a square of background fabric and this little block down here. So it's just basically a 4-patch. You're going to connect those two, and this is the start of our first block. So far pretty easy, right? Then we're going to take that block and we're going to sew it together with a few other bigger squares, and now we have this block. So that's this corner right here. Then we're going to do a couple more folded corners. So this is what goes right here, and this color is what's happening right here. So we're going to use the folded corner technique for this, and again I like to draw my lines again with a nice fine tip marker or pen or pencil, and then you're going to sew just slightly to the outside edge of the line. And the reason I have you sew just slightly is it allows for the turn of the fabric when you press that this meets all the outer corners and it isn't, you know, shy like this or something. So you're going to draw all those lines and then you're going to sew, and we're going to trim the bulk out and press. Now if you're not a fan of drawing lines, you can use the Seam So Easy, which is the template that I have here on the machine, and it has those lines drawn for you. You can also use diagonal seam tape. This is done by Cluck Cluck Sew, and this does basically the same thing as that, and this just tapes down in the bed of your machine. And then as you're sewing, you can follow the red line with the tip of your square as you sew. So that saves a little bit of time if you prefer not to sit and draw lines. So in addition to making this block, we also need to make a reverse because we have one on the opposite side of the block. So you're going to do a bunch of pairs like that. Then you're going to just turn the block around and do a background square with the folded corner on either side. So once you get that done, let's pull this one out. Then we're going to start connecting that piece. Let me grab that quick. You can see here it is right here. So we're going to connect this to a matching square here, and we're going to take the mirror image and we're going to connect it to that block that we made earlier. Now probably the most difficult part of the pattern is connecting this little intersection here. So if you've been sewing accurately as you go along, it shouldn't be too bad, but I can share with you a couple little tips that I have for lining that up. So let's pick these two pieces up, and we're going to lay them right sides together how we're going to be sewing. And then I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to put it down, you see on the seam line right there, about 1/4 inch in on that diagonal line. Then you're going to position that in the same spot on the piece underneath. I don't know if you can see where I have the pin going through. So it's 1/4 inch from the edge. And then we're going to push those two pieces together so that point that we want lined up is right on top of the point below. And then I'm going to put a little pin in front like this. So then as you go to your machine and sew, you're going to sew over this pin, and this one is kind of free. And as you sew towards it, right before you get to this, you're going to pull it out. And that way it doesn't have any chance to shift or move around on you, and that point will stay nice in place. Now I want to share one other way of doing that. If you don't like working with pins, or let's say your machine doesn't handle pins very well, you can also do a gluing technique. And this is something I've just seen in the last little while, and I think it's kind of handy, so I want to share that with you as well. So what we're going to do is use, this one is called Apple Glue. This is by Jill Finley. She's another designer for Riley Blake. And there's a couple different glues on the market that you could use. Acorn Seam-Align glue is another option, but they're all very simple and easy to use. And all you need to do is put a little dot of glue right where your pin was. Whoops, I got a big dot of glue. You will really only need a little dot of glue. And then what you're going to do is push those together so they're nice and lined up again, and the pin's kind of holding it in place. Then you can step over to your iron, and you can use your iron to set the glue. And just hold it there long enough to dry the glue so that it holds it together. And then that glue will keep it in place instead of using your pin, and then you just go and sew it as you normally would. And the glue stays in there, and when it's all done, you don't even see that it was there, but it kept your pieces aligned for you. So after you do that, and you have that block sewn together, then we're going to sew a folded corner to the center of the block here. And you can see I've already done it there, and that will complete your section of the block. And then you're going to make 4 of those, and then you're past the hard part, and we're ready to add the sashing. So I've got that laid out here. There's some cream pieces here, and there's a little post in the middle that matches this fabric. So you can go ahead and connect all those pieces to complete your block, and then it will look like this here. And then when you're done with that, we can go ahead and add sashing. So I'm going to use this for my sashing, which is another piece from that Winter Wonder collection, and you're going to be sewing into rows. And eventually, you'll get a quilt that looks like this. So I don't have this made yet, but when Riley Blake asked me to do a tutorial, I knew I wanted to make my aster in this fabric collection, so this is how that's going to look when it's all done. So when I get back home, I can continue working on and completing that quilt. So that's all I have for today. Thank you all for joining me and watching along. If you want to find me on Instagram, you can just Google Anka's Treasures. I also have a website where you can find this, and you can ask for the fabric at your local quilt shop.